We are ready to start our webinar. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome all the participants at the webinar jointly organized by UNESCO Institute for Information Technologies in Education and Shanghai Open University. We are glad to have here at the webinar the participants from 36 countries. Before we move to the opening remarks, a short technical comment. Please put your questions to the Q&A section. We will try to answer the question at the end of the webinar. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tao Zhang, Director of UNESCO IITE, to deliver his opening remarks to the participants. Unfortunately, Mr. Tao couldn't join us, but he kindly recorded the video to greet the participants. Please start the video from Mr. Zhang.
Dear Dr. Xiaojun, dear Dr. Neil Busher, dear speakers representing universities and organizations from different regions of the world, dear participants and friends. Greetings from UNESCO Institute IITE based in Moscow. This is a short video of welcome and thanks. Welcome to all participants and thanks to all partners and speakers. Sorry, I'm not able to join you live online for this interesting webinar organized by IITE in collaboration with Shanghai Open University and other partners. UNESCO IITE is a global institute of UNESCO and the only one with this mandate in promoting digital technologies and artificial intelligence in teaching and learning, supporting member states, universities and schools, teachers and students to leverage the full power of technologies to achieve SDG 4 and to ensure ethical and inclusive use of artificial intelligence in education. We organize regularly webinars entitled Harnessing Technologies to Transform Education with our collaboration partners. And today's webinar is one of them within the joint project of IITE and Shanghai Open. We appreciate the partnership with Shanghai Open and with Dr. Xiao and his team. Shanghai Open is a close collaborative partner with UNESCO. It hosts the UNESCO Unit Twin Network in distance and open learning since 1997. It is one of the early winners of UNESCO Prize on ICT in Education. The collaboration between IITE and Shanghai Open focuses on open universities and open education, teacher capacity building in the artificial intelligence era, and more. In 2024, last year, jointly with UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, UIL, and a number of other organizations and universities, Shanghai Open and IITE launched the Global Network for Digital Lifelong Learning, aiming at promoting community-based learning and lifelong learning through collective efforts. Dear colleagues, artificial intelligence offers unlimited new possibilities of innovation, though many unprecedented concerns. One of the trends, I believe, is that all traditional universities will go open to become open university, and community-based learning coordinated by Open University will become a new model of learning and a new model of lifelong learning. Therefore, the outcome of the IITE Shanghai Open project and your innovative practice will help many other universities and lead the way forward. Once again, I'd like to thank all partners for your contribution, all participants for your engagement, and my thanks also to my colleague Tatiana for coordinating and organizing this webinar. I wish you a very productive discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Zhang. Now it's my pleasure to pass the floor to Mr. Jun Xiao, Dean of the College of Science and Technologies at the Shanghai Open University.
Okay.
Please, Mr. Strauss.
Dear colleagues and friends, good evening from Shanghai and good morning or afternoon to all of you, whenever you are joining from. It's a great pleasure to join you today for this important webinar as part of our joint project on community-based learning. On behalf of Shanghai Open University, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Dr. Tao Zhan for his insightful introduction and warm welcome. And also UNESCO IITE and all partner institutions for your support and collaboration in this meaningful initiative. This report reflects not only the current state of practice in community-based learning, but also points towards a shared vision for the future. One that is inclusive, collaborative, and empowered by digital innovation. It shows us how technology and community engagement can go hand in hand to create better learning experiments. At Shanghai Open University, we have long believed in the transformative power of community-based learning, especially when combined with digital tools and AI technologies. For us, CBO, it's not just about where learning happens. It's about who is involved, how they interact, and how technology can help build lasting learning communities. In our contribution to the report, we introduced one of our key initiatives, the AI and metaverse-based online teaching and community learning platform. The core idea is to create a virtual learning community where students, teachers, and AI agents collaborate in immersive and intelligent environments. This model has been especially valuable for adult learners, remote learners, and those with specific needs, offering flexible access, personalized support, and a strong sense of connection. One of our key achievements has been using this platform to support learners with specific needs, including elderly learners and remote adult learners. Through adaptive learning paths, real-time feedback, and inclusive digital tools, we hope to overcome barriers of time, space, and access. Features such as simplified using interfaces, speech-based guidance, and cross-device accessibility are designed to ensure no learner is left behind. We have also built AI agents for adult English learning and sentence writing, helping teachers guide students more effectively and helping students build confidence in real tasks. What's most encouraging is the feedback we have received. Many teachers say the platform saves them time while improving feedback quality. Adult learners have told us it's like having a personal coach, and some elderly users say the system feels warm and easy to follow, like a patient friend, not a machine. We see this as just the beginning. With the support of IIT and through continued exchange with all of you, we hope to expand our collaboration, learn from each other, and together build more inclusive and dynamic learning ecosystems. To close, I'd like to once again thank you for having us here today. We look forward to learning from you and working together to promote inclusive, intelligent, and community-driven education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Xiao, for your informative and encouraging presentation. And now I would like to give the floor to our keynote speaker, Mr. Neil Butcher, the founder and director of Neil Butcher and Associate organization. He is a recognized expert in open education and in various areas related to digital transformation of higher education. Neil is an author of the analytical report on community-based learning in higher education that you could be aware of via the link published in the chat. Please, Mr. Butcher, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tatiana, and welcome everyone from whichever part of the world you're in today. I see from the chat that we have people from many different locations. I personally am based in Johannesburg in South Africa, where I've been working as an educational technology specialist for the last 33 years or so, but working all around the world. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Alison Zimmerman, who is also of South African descent, but is actually living in Vietnam at the moment. And she will be sharing the presentation responsibilities with me today, as she also was primarily responsible for a lot of the research done for this report and for compiling the report itself as well. So it's a great privilege for us to be able to present the findings of the work that we've done over the last 6 months or so, and we certainly hope that you'll find it interesting. Just by quick way of background, I was appointed last year to produce an analytical report on the role of community-based learning and digital technologies, which comprised 2 primary research activities. The first was extensive desk research on community-based learning, both at open and traditional universities. We also, through that process, explored various theoretical approaches to CBL, looked at communities of practice and the scope of existing practices. And then in addition to that, because the literature is somewhat limited in this space and the field is moving so fast, we also did 10 case studies of best practices in CBL. Obviously, we relied on the desk research to try and identify those examples of good practice. And then we followed up and ran a series of online interviews with people. We will present a few of those examples in our presentation, but we've actually invited several representatives from those case studies to also come and share a few of their thoughts about their ongoing practice, and many of them are joining us today. So after our presentation, we'll also have the opportunity to hear from them. So as I've indicated, our starting point was to try to identify the theoretical foundations of community-based learning with a focus on the use of digital technologies. I'm sure many of you are in this field, and so you'll know that that's not a straightforward matter or exercise, because there are lots of different definitions of community-based learning, and particularly also because the whole area of digital technologies is evolving so fast. But nevertheless, we gave it a good go as best as we could. When we went through the process of identifying case studies, we started by looking at quality and detail of information that we could find about the initiative. We were obviously keen particularly to look for those examples that had evidence of some clear innovation using technology. And then the last criterion for participation was, of course, the willingness of someone from the university's program to participate in the research process. And that research comprised either completing a questionnaire or participating in an interview, and then ongoing follow-up that took place from there. So we then pulled all of that together into the final report, where we tried to look at findings across all of the data that we had collected, and made a few recommendations at the end. Just to give you a very quick sense, these are the kinds of search terms that we tried to use when we started our desk research exercise. Various combinations of these things. You can see fairly broad-based. This is not all of them, but as you'll see, we also learned a lot in this process, and a lot of new terminology, which we also then fed back into our searching processes as we proceeded. So just in terms of then starting with the theoretical foundations of community-based learning and a few key insights, obviously there's much more detail in the report. The first key thing that emerged was in terms of focus areas that we identified from the research. The first one was on the whole theme of how universities can fulfill their third mission and become providers of scaled learning programs and initiatives that impact societies beyond the core functions of teaching and research. So obviously, when we're talking about the third mission, that's assuming that the first and second missions are the teaching and research. And so this is really about that third mission of the university, focusing on social engagement, community outreach, etc., etc. What we discovered is, as I've mentioned already, ongoing evolving definitions of and concepts of community-based learning itself, and of course even of the notion of community, what constitutes a community. And then of course, unsurprisingly, a key focus area was looking at how digital technologies can be deployed to deliver sustainable, human-centric community-based learning initiatives. Obviously, especially with the emergence of the various tools that collectively are currently called artificial intelligence. I say that because I think very often we're using AI as a shorthand that is actually confusing the landscape, because it's clustering together very different technologies and tools that actually have different functions. So I try and at least always talk about AI tools and platforms rather than to talk about AI as a collective noun. The reality is we don't understand at this stage what the impact of AI in education is going to be. So that's one of my pet bugbears as I work around the world, is the extent to which people who are in the edtech space seem so very confident to claim particular impacts and benefits of AI, when we really are just at the very beginning of learning about what the technology's capabilities will be and what potential educational benefit they might bring. So one of my key points to make there would be the importance of distinguishing between serious statements about educational impact and marketing jargon that's being propagated either by the technology companies themselves or very often by the edtech specialists who have a vested interest in trying to persuade us that these tools are the solution to all of the world's educational problems. Having been around in the field of edtech for over 30 years, I've seen that cycle many times, and I don't see any particular differences in this round. Just in terms of just a few examples of various kinds of definitions of community-based learning, and we have tried to document this very much more extensively in the report itself. So at the top there, CBL integrates problem-based service learning, volunteerism, and experiential learning across various different disciplines. Number two, CBL is grounded in the belief that all communities have intrinsic educational assets and resources that educators can use to enhance learners' learning experiences. We also see definitions focusing on the idea that learning in CBL is reciprocal and collaborative, drawing on a range of resources and knowledge that extend beyond the academic content of a specific learning program. And when it then comes to the sort of technology side, a feeling that CBL engagement in the digital or virtual space is typically synchronous or else blended, with technologies primarily used to facilitate live engagement. And obviously we put live in inverted commas there. Now, I'm sure many of you listening to that will be wanting to contest many of those different things. And I think that's really exactly the point of this section in the report, is to highlight that this is a contested and fluid concept, and especially when we add the digital technologies, that will continue to evolve for the foreseeable future. I'm not sure that that's a problem, and I think hopefully what the report will help with is providing a sense of the richness of the concept and the many varying applications that it has in the field. And I think the more one reads through all of that, the richer one's understanding of what the power and potential of community-based learning might be, and then also particularly to then have any considerations about the use of digital technology grounded in a strong understanding of what community-based learning is. so that the technology is supporting the implementation of community-based learning and not leading the design of the initiative, which is often a risk with technology. So we then focus on why the interest in community-based learning, and this links to the concept of the university's third mission. So we see around the world with particular types of universities, particularly, that emphasis is growing and has been growing for some time on the third mission of universities, which is beyond the core functions of teaching and research. And if we then look at this sort of second block where there's a little bit of a definition here, that the third mission has an entrepreneurial focus, a force for social and economic development, a set of activities that seek to transfer knowledge and technologies that support innovation, social welfare, and the development of human capital. So there's obviously lots more to the third mission of universities that we could talk about, but for the sake of time, I won't get into more detail there. But as we observe in the report, obviously the world faces ubiquitous and significant environmental, social, and economic challenges. Since we wrote this report, one could argue that the social and economic challenges have increased exponentially, in fact. So we're facing ongoing challenges that we need to grapple with. And universities really do play a key role in responding to those challenges, and are uniquely positioned to collaborate with governments, civil society, industry, local communities, and other agencies to address these challenges. I think that notion of being uniquely positioned to collaborate with all of those other players is an important one, because I feel sometimes that too often universities are seeking to compete with or be like some of those other social stakeholders. But I really think it's the coming together of these three missions that gives universities its unique positioning and power. And expressing that in the third mission does offer universities a unique value proposition in terms of what they can contribute to the response to these significant challenges that we face. So community-based learning is a vehicle through which to engage, innovate, and be a force for development. So that's the sales pitch, as it were, for community-based learning. And then for many institutions and in a lot of the research, the third mission is also seen as a matter of ethics. So that higher education is a key tool for promoting sustainable human development and social responsibility and that's an ethical requirement for universities, that it's not just an opportunity and a possibility, but it's actually a responsibility that universities have to be able to be fulfilling that third mission. The report reflects briefly on how universities' innovation in social impact might be acknowledged. So the World University Rankings for Innovation is an example of an initiative that seeks to acknowledge universities for innovative practices, and this includes a dimension that focuses on social impact. Categories in that ranking include innovations in student support and engagement, social responsibility, and the adoption of infrastructure and technologies to support programs. So this gives us, first of all, a framework for thinking about what kinds of elements might make up these types of CBL initiatives. But I think also very importantly, it gives them recognition and a certain degree of status that they warrant. Many of you I know are involved in CBL, and we all know that it's a significant challenge for third mission activities, particularly in areas of social impact, often to compete with the more traditional activities and focuses of the university. So these kinds of rankings are helpful in that regard. As I mentioned in my introductory slides, in addition to the concept of community-based learning, the concept of community itself is also evolving, and particularly when we think of the use of digital technologies in CBL, it's important that we consider this. So not only, but in significant part because of the rapid explosion of digital technologies and the growth of knowledge societies, the concept of community itself is evolving. So that communities of learning, practice, and inquiry are, at least for many people who have the technological access, becoming increasingly unconstrained by geographic barriers. Digital technologies obviously enable virtual, location-independent community engagement, problem solving, and learning. Obviously, that brings a number of challenges with it, and introduces issues as to what kinds of interaction are supported by this type of virtual location-independent engagement, and what require more traditional face-to-face engagement. But nevertheless, this is evolving the whole concept of community. And then communities of practice have always been particularly important to community-based learning. So this focuses on groups of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do and learn how to do it better as they interact regularly. I do hope that in some respects, at least temporarily, this webinar and the report brings together a community of practice in community-based learning that might not have existed previously to this. So we also got some, obviously, just definitions of community-based learning from our research respondents. So we've just collected a small sample of these. Again, there's much more in the research itself. So just reading these out very quickly: a community of primary professionals engaging in continuous professional development through collaboration that positively impacts the communities they serve. Second one, enabling of a research community and ecosystem through collaboration, which impacts a much broader community. Third, a pedagogical approach that integrates academic study with community engagement, learners actively participating in real-world projects and addressing community needs, fostering social responsibility. And then just two more: a multi-interactive learning environment through digital technologies and AI, where learners, teachers, and AI agents learn and collaborate in a virtual community, emphasizing knowledge sharing, interactive learning, and enhancing student autonomy. So you obviously see there that definition brings in the digital dimension very strongly. And then lastly, enabling a community that experiences a systemic barrier to be able to achieve their goals, a community that largely exists in online groups and forums with hundreds of members. Again, this last one focusing on the digital dimension of CBL. Again, I think if you look at all of these taken together, they kind of complement each other and they build on each other, again, signifying just what a rich and diverse field CBL really is. So I'm at this point now, this will be my last slide, and then I'm going to hand over to Alison, who will take us through a few examples of the good practices that we found, and we're excluding those people who are participating today so that they can speak for themselves. But just as a summary from my side, some core purposes of community-based learning that were evident from the desk research that we did was the application of formal knowledge and skills in real or simulated contexts. Also, an important role of ongoing or continuing professional development for people in employment or in semi-employment, community outreach and social impact, collaboration amongst communities of practice for the promotion of innovation in learning and knowledge production, and then lastly, harnessing opportunities for inclusion of diverse perspectives in learning. And I like that last one particularly because it does highlight also that the role of CBL is not only about the university giving to the community and serving the community, it's also about the role that participation in community-based learning offers the universities and academics to actually learn from the CBL experiences and draw those lessons back in to the first and second missions of the university. And I think it's very important that we recognize that that is a critical role for CBL, so that it's not just seen as a kind of charity exercise or corporate social responsibility exercise, but actually that it's seen very actively as a critical element of the overall functioning of the universities. So with that all said, I hand over to my colleague, Alison, who's going to take you through a few examples of the case studies and then highlight some of the core findings coming from across the case studies. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite Alison to take over the screen sharing and to take up the presentation from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Share. There we are. So firstly, I would just like to say and apologize. I'm just recovering from a bit of a chest cold. I'd like to firstly thank Tatiana and Neil and also Professor Prof. Shao for your introduction earlier. And also to the participants that so enthusiastically and willingly shared their experiences of CBL for us to be able to construct these case studies. So as Neil has said, what I'm going to be doing is just outlining some of the key features of selected case studies, 4 of them, and for the others, we've got the participants themselves who will be presenting something in the discussion section of today's session. I'll also be looking at some of the trends in technology, but also just generally related to CBL that came through the case studies. And to begin with, I just want to pick up really on something that Professor Shao, a phrase that Professor Shao mentioned in his introduction, and that was the concept of no learner left behind. And I think this is something we saw across all of the case studies as an emphasis for CBL, was the concept of making learning accessible, inclusive, and broadening access to learning and to problem solving and to getting involved in social change. So yeah, that was a really good or a very useful phrase that Dr. Shao gave us right at the beginning, because it really represents all of our case studies. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to begin with Open University of Malaysia, or OUM. And so this was an example of an institution-wide CBL initiative where they have established a Center for Instructional Design and Technology. And their key focus as an online or a distance learning open university is they are leveraging AI for data-driven insights to develop individualized online learning solutions for students. So I think this draws on, or it speaks to some of the challenges traditionally of distance learning, and even the whole kind of MOOC movement, where the learner engagement kind of took a back seat, or learner engagement was just not really a focus for how learning was designed. So what the CIDT at OUM has done is they have created a multidisciplinary team, and that team consists of obviously the learning designers, subject matter experts, the technology experts, and so there's a very big team of collaborators that are involved in creating a platform where learner engagement is the focus. So they are taking into consideration, for example, the fact that a lot of they have a component of marginalized learners. So they would serve learners, for example, who are incarcerated, learners who live in remote communities in Borneo, who would otherwise lack access to online learning support. And what they have done is they've focused on personalizing learning. But in terms of accessibility, they've taken into account the fact that technology is costly and the technology itself is not always accessible to all learners. So if learning is digital or delivered in a digital way, they have ensured that they have mobile apps. So there are different ways that learners can access their learning content, and they engage learners in different ways with the focus on personalizing the learning. So there are a few aspects like gamification, AI tutors. So they've looked at it from a number of different aspects, and really a big focus there on inclusion and accessibility, and ensuring that learners are engaged and supported according to their individual and personal needs. So the CIDT is continually working on this, improving it. There's also a modular design, so they're able to switch out components of the learning programs, and are able to, or learning leaders are able to respond timelessly to the needs of learners. So that was one example of an institution-wide, initiative. The second one that I'll talk about is the Stanford Graduate School of Education, which is based at Stanford University in California. And the Stanford Accelerator was an interesting one for us because they have established it, or what the accelerator is a kind of hub where co-collaboration happens across a range of projects. So a teacher, for example, or a community member, or somebody can come to the accelerator and say, this is a problem I'd like to solve, or this is an issue that I'd like to work on to do something in the learning space, in the technology space. And they have an emphasis on neuroscience also. So the science of learning is integrated very much into everything that they do. And in this instance, the one that we focused on when we were building the case study was virtual field trips. And what was interesting about this was that they have learners who are interested in getting involved in humanitarian response. So, for example, in refugee camps, there might be teachers or learners who are studying to become teachers who are interested in some way getting involved in education initiatives in refugee camps. But obviously, being able to really understand the conditions in those camps is not easy for them to do. It's not, you know, it's not possible, in fact, in a lot of cases, for them to be able to visit a refugee camp to truly understand the issues, the layout, the specific challenges that people living there face. And so one example of a virtual field trip that they have developed is where they've used AI and they've used 3D photography and they've used a range of other technologies to create a virtual field trip of a refugee camp. And the learners then are able to have a simulated and immersive experience where they can visit the camp virtually. They can learn about the conditions. They can better understand the education needs and the solutions that are needing to be developed so that they could support learning and education in those camps. So that was just one example. They have many other examples, but we thought that this one was really quite interesting. So the accelerator also has, depending on the project, I think their success is that they have also very dynamic teams, and each project is very dynamic and individual. So there's support provided from a number of different stakeholders in that process. So they would have the designers, they would have those with the experience in learning, and the team that is trying to solve the problem. And they will then co-create, they will collaborate and co-create a solution. So that was an example of perhaps a more, you know, a small, not an institution-wide initiative, but one that has the, I suppose, the potential to be institution-wide in terms of the methodology that they use being able to be reproduced really in any other department or school within Stanford. Then the next one that I'm going to talk about is Athabasca University in Canada. And just a little bit of context there for this one is that Athabasca also largely or partially a distance learning university. It's an open learning university, and they have learners from some quite remote areas that are enrolled for their business programs and other programs of study. And they also have First Nations and Indigenous learners that are living on reserves, also remote areas where sometimes technology is not readily available, and they might not be able to fulfill some of the requirements of their business courses. So, for example, this is where the case study comes from. One of the requirements of the business courses is that students have to complete work integrated learning as a requirement. And work integrated learning is not, it's not something that a learner that's in a very remote area easily accesses, or there might be limitations in terms of the types of companies, firms, organizations available that can offer them work integrated learning. And in the university's experience, at times when learners go for their placements, they don't always get a very enriching experience. So they looked at it from a number of different angles, and a lot of their learners also are working full-time, so they are studying part-time, and so again, work integrated learning is difficult for them. And so what they've done is they've created virtual cooperatives using AI, machine learning, and LLMs and natural language processing. So each cooperative is designed so that it represents a workplace and a workplace context. And what the designers and the lecturers have done is they have been able to curate experiences for these simulations, where they're able to guide the learners in terms of dealing with sometimes challenging situations, like a really difficult boss or a manager who is displaying bullying behavior. And so they've looked at it from a number of different angles, and they've created, in their words, a safe context, which is also very realistic, and it enables students and learners to engage in work integrated learning. So where the AI comes in is that the learner has to, at this stage, they are working on, the actual tools are constantly evolving. But at this stage, students will, for example, encounter a context. They will type in a response to that, or they will engage in some way. And then there's sort of an AI tutor, in a sense, that responds to them. And the lecturer is in the background, also getting involved. So what students have reported in these co-ops is that they've uncovered their own biases. So one example that was shared with us was where learners or students have to look at a number of service providers, potential service providers, to provide a service to the company where, at which they're working. And the most logical choice for that service would be an Indigenous or a company owned, a firm owned by Indigenous or First Nations owners, but that is seldom the option that gets selected. And so what this has done is it has led to a whole lot of discussion and extended learning around bias and how bias exists in the workplace. And it's created that safe environment for students to be able to discuss that and to engage with their own values and perspectives. And so what this case study showed us was that the technology creates the simulation, which is, that's very useful in itself. But as they've rolled this out and as they're developing new cooperatives, they're finding that a lot of other benefits are coming through this. And another one of those benefits is that they have some students who self-identify as being on the autism spectrum, for example. And this wasn't something that was initially intended in the design. Sorry, but students later reported that this style of learning and engagement was actually really suited to their neurodivergence. And so I think what this case study showed us is that, there are the intended aspects of the design, but through these projects and through the organic nature of some of these projects, other benefits have emerged and have then enabled a feedback loop so that they, the designers, the lecturers, and the learning teams can actually grow that experience and enrich the experience for learners even more. So that was the AI-powered virtual co-ops. The fourth example I'm going to talk about is the AI Health Lab at Makerere University in Uganda. And here, the problem that they were trying to address was that in low resource settings, sort of out in perhaps rural clinics or hospitals, they don't have sufficient technicals or technicians to do microscopy. So, for example, there might be a community clinic with patients presenting with symptoms of malaria. And this can be diagnosed from tissue samples or blood samples. But because they don't have the technicians on site before this project, there would have to be a lot of toing and froing, sending the samples into one of the bigger centers, and there would be a delay in getting diagnoses and all of this sort of thing. So the AI Health Lab was established to use AI, machine learning, computer-aided design, 3D printing to create diagnostic tools. And in this case, it's a tool that can snap onto a smartphone. And so what occurs at the clinic is that any healthcare worker at that clinic, even if they're not a technician that normally handles this, is able to take an image or a slide image, and it gets uploaded to the platform via the smartphone and via the app. And it becomes a diagnostic support tool. So the machine learning is obviously occurring all the time. So the app and the tech is able to make a pre-diagnosis of, yes, this is malaria, or no, whatever the case might be. But then they do have the specialists in the centers that confirm the diagnosis. So I think what was important to me about this case study is that I think perhaps there, in terms of the technology itself, there's perhaps some fear that AI is going to take away the need for specialists. But the participants in this case were very clear that the technology is a diagnostic support tool, and it can be quite powerful. It's extremely useful. It's very, very scalable. But they still rely on human specialization to confirm diagnoses. Now, again, as with some of the other case studies, what Makerere has discovered through the process is that there's a whole lot of other learning and community building, in fact, that has happened as a result of this initiative. So the initiative itself is more about, using tech for diagnosis, but in the process of implementing it, they've had to go into some of the more remote communities. They have had to work with local people and the community members who perhaps are unfamiliar with these types of technologies. So they've done a lot of scaffolding work with lay people in the communities to explain these technologies, to explain how they benefit patients in the healthcare sector. And so there's been that level of awareness of kind of sort of learning and teaching happening among lay members of those communities, but also among the healthcare workers themselves. So there are, in this case study, many layers of learning and learning community that were established through the development of these diagnostic tools that use AI. And they have since been able to, and are actually in the process of using this for other infectious diseases as a diagnostic tool. So this is probably, the first of several tools that will be developed, and which are very sort of simple, but very effective in low resource settings. So those are just 4 examples of cases where AI and digital technologies are used to some extent for learning purposes and to solve community problems. I'm not going to, I think Shanghai, we've already had a discussion of that. So what I'm going to look at now is emerging trends identified from the case study. So now I'd be talking about what the trends that we identified and looking at all 11 case studies that we collected for the report. And the first is that the development, or if we just think about the purposes of CBL, so Neil already presented some from the theoretical perspective. And what we found from the case studies was the following, that one of the purposes is the actual development of new technologies to solve problems. So the digital technologies are, are there to facilitate learning, but the development of technologies to facilitate learning and problem solving is also a purpose of CBL in several of our case studies. In-service training and professional development in diverse communities. So this, for example, from the Makerere University AI Health Lab, where you have learning happening among healthcare workers from different communities across the country in Uganda. And we're going to hear about another case study a little later during the discussion in South Africa in the Eastern Cape, where digital technology is used to facilitate professional development in a very diverse community. The personalization of learning across the learning community enabled by digital technologies. This was a very strong point that came through in most of the case studies, is that the technology is used to facilitate personalization. So even where you have, perhaps a massive group of learners enrolled in a program, you can use the digital technologies to personalize the learning for each of those learners to some extent. And so that was quite a significant purpose that we saw coming through. Accessibility, equity, and inclusion. So again, to go back to Dr. Shao and his phrase, no learner left behind, that was also extremely strongly represented in most of our case studies. So the issue of accessibility of learning within the learning community, equity and inclusion, so that learning is available to anyone who wants it, and that the technology can facilitate the learning for that learner, even within a larger group. And then also scaling of an initiative beyond initial design and purpose to expand the community of learning and to broaden the impact. And we're going to hear from Dr. Art Thomas from Syracuse University a little later, but there was an example of an initiative where the initiative began, and it kind of evolved and it has got bigger. We're also going to hear from some representatives, I believe, from the National University of Singapore. The same thing, where an initial initiative dynamically grew to be a scaled initiative beyond its design. So I think what we can take away from that is that, as Neil said before, this is a very much evolving field. And we're in the early stages of experimenting and using these tools. But there are, and the last point I've made is there are a lot of unanticipated benefits and impacts. And so the design did not always include things that later were reported and proven to be impacts. And one example is the work cooperatives and learners self-identifying with autism, commenting that this way of learning actually suited them really well. So if we take a look at the technologies used in CBL, to some extent, AI, artificial intelligence, is applied to some extent for all common purposes in all of the 11 case studies. And so the primary uses for technology to promote learner engagement or to increase learner engagement for learning accessibility, to enable tailor-made projects to solve problems in specific contexts, to reduce barriers to learning, and for the personalization of learning. So the actual application of the technologies covered those points. And then if we briefly look at the forms of AI used in CBL. So as Neil said earlier, the term AI is used perhaps quite loosely to encompass a whole lot of things. But if we break it down in terms of what we learned from these case studies, the one thing that is used quite a lot is natural language processing. So, for example, NLP is used to design chatbots that can assist in personalizing learning and supporting, providing support to learners. So that also, in that process, would use machine learning to train those models. Generative AI is used to generate the personalized responses and the support that is provided or suggested to learners. The large language model technology enables generative AI. In some cases, we had AI-generated mentors and characters. So, for example, the Athabasca cooperative work cooperatives there were AI-generated characters that could engage with the learner as they worked through that simulation. So that was one use. And then data analytics, which came up in several of our case studies, which enables the identification and early prediction of learning challenges so that appropriate interventions can be deployed to learners. And during the discussion session, we will hear from the University of New South Wales, from one of their representatives, who will talk a little bit about this. So one of the challenges of learning, perhaps especially in a distance context, or where learners are trying to juggle many aspects of their life in addition to their formal learning or even their non-formal learning, data analytics enables the early prediction of outcomes, really. So looking at behaviors like how often learners are logging in, looking at their completion rate of coursework, that kind of thing, and the data analytics being utilized basically to provide early support and intervention. And then something I suppose that has become ubiquitous to us since COVID certainly is that learning community engagement is enabled by digital communication apps. So we are using one right now, and in all of our case studies, to some extent, there was just the use of our well-known communication apps to facilitate that community engagement. So if we look at modes of collaboration applied to CBL, the technology supported collaboration among the learning community in every case study. Several of those forms of AI and digital technologies were used to support collaboration in different ways. Virtual meeting and messaging apps are used to facilitate synchronous collaboration where it is required. And where the CBL initiative involved faculty and students of an institution, synchronous and asynchronous collaboration occurred through that institution's LMS, in addition to other communication apps. So we didn't deal with this very strongly in the report, but for example, even social media apps are being used in addition to the traditional LMS. To facilitate communication in different ways within a learning community or across a learning community. And then we looked at, one of the things we asked about when we were constructing the case studies was challenges and sustainability. And we drew some key ones here, which I think a lot of institutions would be able to relate to. The first is that financial and technological resourcing are challenges for scaled sustainable initiatives, and for those that require complex programming or design. So the back end programming and testing and all of those kinds of things, and the tech infrastructure can be quite expensive to establish. But obviously also the cost of some of the technologies comes down as they are adopted increasingly. So hardware and internet access for learners are constraints in low resource settings. So sometimes we need a less is more approach. And that is evident in one of our case studies that we will discuss later by Bryony Chisholm, where when you need to have low data requirements and something simple, WhatsApp, for example, can be an app that you would use instead of something that is very complex and that requires expensive hardware and internet access. Capacity building is a challenge if it's not addressed from the beginning. For example, training users in the technologies and upgrading their skills as the technologies evolve. So where initiatives are scaled, these have to be taken into consideration. The capacity building is really important. And then what we found through some of the desk research was that we found instances of some CBL projects, which I would call passion projects. So they were initiated by an individual with a very strong interest in a particular problem or a learning aspect. But if that individual exits the institution, there isn't always the kind of succession plan in place to do anything with it. So that it sort of, need to think about that if that is how the project comes into play initially. Sustainability is a product of adequate resourcing, capacity, support, and suitable design in relation to the intended purpose. So one of the key things that came through in all of these case studies actually was a human-centered approach to design. So what is the purpose, and where is the human located within that? What does the human need? And then using the resourcing around that, or arranging for and applying and deploying resources in relation to how humans learn and what their needs are in that context. And then outreach and social responsibility are inherent in all cases, but universities don't all have formalized policies for institution-wide CBL that incorporates these advanced digital technologies. So this is something that comes up later in the recommendations also, that if institutions are going to look at adopting technologies to facilitate CBL, they do need to be looking at their policy framework and formalizing that in some way. And then if we move on just briefly to recommended principles for CBL development, again, these were derived from what we learned from the case studies and, excuse me, from the desk research. So universities should create or join networks to strengthen their third mission and their CBL efforts. And in the report, we have some examples of these networks. And I'm sure people that are participating in this webinar today will have knowledge of those networks. CBL and service learning require formal policies, as I've mentioned. Institutions should define community in meaningful ways to support effective CBL initiatives that align with their mission. So again, going back to that issue, that community, what we learned was that community is such a broad concept, and what the technologies do is they break down geographic barriers and other barriers. And so defining community needs to be meaningful to the initiative and to the mission of that institution. Digital technology should fit the context, particularly in resource-limited areas. A robust digital infrastructure is crucial for advanced CBL technologies. Financial sustainability should be considered in the planning phase. So right up front, there should be some consideration for what all the costs are going to be and how it's going to be financially sustainable. And then equity, accessibility, and inclusion should be core principles for CBL planning and implementation. And projects should use suitable methodologies and a human-focused approach for sustainability. So as Neil mentioned earlier, there's often a lot of hype about the technology in and of itself. But really, the key thing is that we know we establish what the methodologies are that promote learning and ensure that the technologies fit, rather than trying to fit the learning into the technology adoption. Okay. So in terms of, formalizing CBL, just to recap, many universities engage in traditional outreach or corporate social responsibility efforts aimed at benefiting the community. But we did find that there was a lack of substantial evidence showing that institutions have comprehensive policies for the widespread adoption or scaling of CBL. So if institutions are interested in that, they should go back to their policy frameworks as well. And this is something recommended by the European Association of Service Learning and Higher Education, that service learning as a form of CBL be formalized as an essential component, or that third mission of the institution's culture and its operations. And the International Commission on the Futures of Education suggests that higher education should incorporate pedagogical strategies involving collaborative student work, research projects, problem solving, field studies, action research, and community projects. So that's from the 2020 report published by UNESCO. And so CBL serves as a potential means to implement those strategies, and therefore it should be formalized in policy. That was a key takeaway that we had from the research. And then in conclusion, just 4 points generally. So universities are engaging in innovative initiatives to serve broader society. So that was a very encouraging thing that we found. And there is a lot of innovation going on. In fact, we had a much longer list of institutions that are doing very innovative things in this space, but for whatever reason, perhaps they weren't able to participate for us to construct a case study. But there is innovation happening. Advanced digital technologies are being developed and deployed to better serve diverse learners and to support problem solving and project-based learning. Adoption of digital technologies in CBL often leads to unintended benefits for learners and the community of learning. And I spoke about that before, that because this is such an evolving space, there were some very kind of inspiring impacts that have come about as a result of these initiatives, which were not initially intended. Opportunities for collaboration, service learning, problem solving, and inquiry across geographic locations and in the virtual world are vastly enhanced by digital technologies. The impacts of universities' work are amplified beyond even their own national borders. So we saw a lot of, just really kind of growing things happening in the space if the technologies are deployed to serve those purposes. So that brings me to the end of my part of the presentation. And I believe, Tatiana, we're going to hand over to our individual participants who have agreed to share a word.
Yes, thank you very much, Alison, and our thank goes to both of you, Neil and Alison, for your comprehensive and insightful presentations and for your work, your engagement in this research and preparation of the report. Now I would like to open the floor for university participating in the research on community-based learning to make quick presentations and share the experience and ideas. I would like to invite Ms. Briony Chisholm from University of Cape Town. Hi, Briony.
Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my presentation. Is that sharing?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay, so I'm Briony Chisholm from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And I'm just here to tell you very briefly about my project where we trained healthcare workers on the national HIV guidelines using WhatsApp-based microlearning. So a little bit of background, HIV treatment is regularly updated, as are the guidelines. So keeping healthcare workers in the field updated on that is vital with ongoing training. Traditionally, our training in South Africa has been centralized with face-to-face training, and more recently, some more long-form online sessions. But there are many challenges to this. So centralized training requires nurses to leave the clinics, often leaving them short-staffed or without clinics. And there are all the costs involved with going to centralized points, transport, accommodation, etc. South Africa covers 1.2 million square kilometers, just to give an idea of the distances that people may need to travel, and of course, infrastructural issues. So we needed something innovative. We've got 100% cell phone penetration in South Africa. 94% of our adults were using WhatsApp. So we designed training using WhatsApp. And we know that time is a very precious resource for nurses in South African clinics. So we used microlearning, which very simply put is bite-sized pieces of information. And what we did was we had live WhatsApp group sessions based at lunchtime, 10 to 15 minutes max. We took learning points from the national guidelines and taught them as a case, then asked a couple of questions to encourage interaction, and then gave the answer in both text and voice note. To test it, we did a pragmatic mixed methods parallel group cluster randomized trial, including 50 clinics in 4 predominantly rural districts in the Eastern Cape, which is one of our more poorly resourced provinces in South Africa. And we had 200 healthcare workers in the intervention group and 235 in the control group. And we measured uptake and participation, usability, and then change in knowledge and patient care. We did online questionnaires, we analyzed the WhatsApp interactions, we did focus groups, and then we did a retrospective folder review of the learning points that were taught, comparing patient care for a year before the intervention to a year after the intervention in both the control and intervention clinics. We had great results. Almost 80% of the healthcare workers who were invited to participate through in-person recruitment visits agreed to participate. Participation in the live groups was between 27 and 51%, but with WhatsApp, we could actually go in and check when people had read it. And by 2 weeks after each lesson, 96% of the nurses and 88% of the community health workers had read the lessons. And we showed a statistically significant improvement in both knowledge and patient care between the intervention and the control arm. When we asked them if they would be willing to participate in this kind of training, if we held it weekly all year, because obviously we did it for a very short period, 98% of them said that they would do that. And then I'll just end with a couple of quotes from the participants post-training. But basically, we showed that WhatsApp-based HIV training was highly acceptable, had very good uptake, and improved both knowledge and patient care. So this is a very simple method that could be used across medical and any field, really, and across countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Briony. Very interesting case of low-tech solution with impressive numbers of participating. Thank you very much. Now we move to Mr. Jon Gaidek from KRIST University. Yes, please, your mic. Your mic is muted.
Hello, myself, Gaidek Jan, and I'm honored to be in this webinar. And also, I'm so thankful to the organizers of this research, and then especially Alison, who approached me first and then guided me throughout. So briefly, I will introduce about WeJump initiative. These are the kids we are serving, and then they are growing as the student leaders for their schools. Currently, we have 20 schools serving, mostly in the southern part of India. And these children are from the rural schools recommended by the principals, 5 to 10 members from each school. And we have provide them the laptops. Initially, they joined with their parents' mobile phones, but now many of them use their laptops. So far, we've been able to provide 79 laptops, and we will continue to do so. And then they share their laptops with their peers. So WeJump is for the digital education for underserved youth, and also provide the leadership training so that they can serve their peers and beyond. We started in 2021 during the COVID, when it was a peak, and then we could reach them out through online, weekly online classes, and it grew year by year. Briefly, I talk about the dream of mother, student, teacher, and the supporter. Here you see the Mr. Abhilash and his mother. Mr. Abhilash's major work was just administrative work in my office. But when he was trained to give digital training to the teachers from the rural areas, then his mother, who is also a cleaning lady in our university, was so impressed. So she said to me that the day Mr. Abhilash conducted a digital class for the teachers was the happiest moment. Then we decided to bring this happiness to more mothers of the children in the rural area. This is the dream of Likith. He is from a village, And then one day he sent me 10 rupees. 10 rupees is a really small amount, but he said, I received much from WeJump. And sir, can you use this 10 rupees for the children who are poorer than I am? So I was so deeply touched, and we started having the fund by these underprivileged children. So with the money they contributed, we could buy 2 laptop computers and support another school. So here at WeJump, children not only receive, but also they give and they share. Here is Tanishka. Yeah. So she joined at grade 6. She's been with us 3+ years. Now she leads a team, and she's a leader. And then she these days teaches the Python programming to many children. So she started as a learner, but now she is a leader. And she also learns international language, say Korean. And last October, she visited South Korea and then inspired many university students. So they initially started as a consumer of digital content, but now they become creators of the content and also influencer. Yeah. This is the dream of teacher Priya. On the top of the photo on the left is the teacher Priya. So she became a source of blessing for her school children. One day she told me, sir, I have a dream after getting engaged with the WeJump, that is to raise 360 global leaders from my students. And then she's keep raising many student leaders who are helping not only the students in her school, but the students in other schools and other states. And on the photo on the left bottom, there is another school. The child is teaching the digital skills to her peers. And then one day they sent me another photo. I was surprised because children were standing and the teachers were sitting. I asked what it is. They said, sir, we are teaching the teachers. I was so thankful to the teachers for their humble learning and also encouraging their students to teach them. Dreams of supporters. We have supporters in several countries. So university students, professionals, and supporters. So they are helping us to grow together. So it is a kind of a mutual learning by participating in this WeJump movement. Not only our children learn, but even the supporters, they do learn and they share their learning experiences. We have a few journeys program. One is a WeJump Academy for Youth. We call it WAY. So these we have around over 600 YouTube videos. These are recorded by the student leaders when they conducted different the digital the classes. On the right, you will see different tools they have learned, and they are teaching, and they are raising next generation leaders. And also we meet not only once a week online, but quarterly offline, and the children do share what they have learned, showcase their skills and the leadership. And once I was surprised that principals, they came back to me and they said, we have a problem in our school. What's that, sir? And then they said, we recommended a few leaders, but now many parents, they're agitating. Why not our children? It's not fair. So each school introduced WET, WeJump entrance test. This was something I didn't imagine, but it's happening. And then we do teach the international language. The children, they can speak in English. So we teach them Korean and German so that they can even go abroad, from village to abroad, and again become global leaders. That's our dream. And then a couple of them visited South Korea International Leadership Program, and we got encouragement from URI. So our university was ranked 39, the most innovative program. And then these 600 canvas combined the picture painted by the 600 children. So this is my last slide. The former president of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam, said, "The dream is not that which you see while sleeping. It is something that does not let you sleep." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gajdek, for your exciting work with underprivileged kids and youth. Thank you very much. And now I'm inviting Mr. Tim Coogan from the Open University, UK. Please,
Hello,
Tim.
everyone. Yes, can you hear me okay? I'll just
Yes,
share
clearly.
slides. Okay, and yeah, you should be able to see my slides now. Okay, yeah, thanks for the invitation, and really great to be a part of this report and piece of research. So I'm Tim Coghlan from the Open University in the UK, and since about 2019, I was involved in projects which have developed virtual assistants to support disabled students, and this came out of our work with our disabled students group, which is an interesting community. At the Open University, we have over 30,000 students who tell us that they have disabilities, and they have a community. It's mostly online. A lot of it is outside the traditional university system. So they meet on social media, and they have various sort of routes to discussion and community activities. We worked with them to create a research agenda. So really just trying to understand the issues of interest to them, and the areas that they wanted us to prioritize. And one of the things that came out of that was the challenge of administrative burden. So in a sense, as a student who has disabilities, you not only have to do all the normal processes when you start studies, but you also have to complete a bunch of additional steps and forms and understand different processes and support. And this was all seen as challenging, causing a lot of stress and so forth, and delays and just not getting support in place. So we worked with those students to develop a virtual assistant. First was called Taylor. And essentially this was something that they could use to tell the university about their needs and to ask questions and so forth. And we're now building on this with projects to design an assistant that could be used across study contexts, so not just for Open University study. So I'll just say a little bit about some of the points where we had that community engage with us. As I said, there was a research agenda, which was the starting point before we got the funding for the project. There was a lot of in-person design workshops and then online workshops. We had funding to pay a small number of students to become consultants to the project. So that gave them a more formal role and us to feel like we could draw on more of their time. And then we've had various trials that have grown in terms of the number of students involved and the amount of feedback and input we've been able to get. Just to say a little bit about Taylor, I mean, some of the things it used language understanding so that the students could talk about disabilities in their own words rather than having to kind of tick boxes and categories. And it also answered their questions. So in this case, this is, earlier technology from the, pre-2021-22. So it was a bit more limited then, but it had a capacity, showed that importance of being able to answer the students' questions. And we can enhance that through the community, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit. In terms of evaluation, our first major trial, we got students to both use the existing process, which was filling in forms, and used Taylor, and most of them preferred using Taylor. So that was encouraging, particularly as it was an early phase design. That was built within about a year, and we knew there was a lot more potential in this space. We were also really interested to understand what more of the students wanted from these kind of technologies. So asking them about it in this trial, and we tend to see sort of consistent findings here across a couple of trials now. The key thing they want is that it makes just suggestions, like personalized suggestions of resources and tools that may be useful to them. The other one is that it helps them complete other forms and processes. So as I said, back to this issue of administrative burden, where they feel like they have to do a lot of work, which is not really their studies, and other things like being able to answer more questions. We've since that project and the original Taylor tool, which was built using kind of old technology now. So we've kind of gone back to the drawing board a bit with this and look at the possibilities of generative AI and a lot of the more advanced machine learning tools we have now. But we've really kind of focused this on what people want. So both the students, the advisors who work with students, other staff who work around disability support, and ran a lot more workshops and just looking at the kind of themes that come out of those. Things like the design challenges, disability is complex to understand, and obviously important that any system can understand nuances and language differences and things like that. Really thinking about the roles and limitations for AI in this, the things it shouldn't be doing, like, if it's not capable of diagnosing something, it shouldn't touch that kind of thing. Also, a lot of interest in the use of data and the control over data. So balancing the ability to learn from the conversations that the assistant might have with a student, as opposed to the concerns that raises for privacy, and also, if students don't want their information to be used in this way, how is that supported? I'll just finish off with an idea that we came up with. I think really speaks to the idea of community-based learning with technology, and that is that we can think about how these kind of AI assistants can be influenced by the groups that use them. In this case, as I said, most students wanted a way that the assistant would provide them with personalized suggestions, things that may be useful to them. And what we did was we gathered through a crowdsourcing platform, Enquire, a large number of suggestions from experienced students about the things that helped them. And then we used Taylor to provide those suggestions to students as they were relevant. So if a student said, for example, I'm dyslexic and struggle with extreme tiredness due to a thyroid condition, it would look in that database and find the suggestions that seem most relevant. So I think that's a really nice example where we're using technology, but we're also using community, and yeah, I'll finish off there. We have a recent paper in Internet Higher Education, and anybody who's interested to know more, let me know.
Thank you, Tim, for your presentation and for the very interesting and fascinating example of work with a vulnerable group of students. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Mr. Arthur Thomas from Syracuse University. Are you here, Arthur? Yes.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. I'd like to share my screen with regard to the iConsult Collaborative. Syracuse University participates in the community in a variety of ways, and this one particular program we started in the School of Information Studies, and then I moved it to the College of Professional Studies, which also has a strong focus on community-based learning. In this particular case, we've constructed a program that involves a variety of people collaborating together using digital technologies as the focus of the work. And in this particular case, we've taken students who are a part of the school's learning digital technologies, and we've deployed them into teams into the community to work with organizations of various types and sizes, and allowing them to become consultants for those particular organizations. So what you see here is the general organization of the iConsult Collaborative, and I called it the collaborative for that reason. It's really the concept that the students, the university, and the community work together to be able to achieve a triple win, because the people in the community gain by having no-cost consulting from the students. The students gain by being able to engage with community leaders and community practitioners in their organizations, and at the same time practice their skills with regard to the technologies. And then the university wins because we have a close collaborative of organizations that work with us, and we can tap into those folks to be able to enhance our programs. And many times these folks will come back as speakers and being able to enhance our classes as well. So it's really a three-way communication process that is really truly collaborative. We are organized, the central square here that has the yellow focus on it, that particular area is what I call a modular team. And that team consists of a representative from a client organization, one of the people in the community who is representative of our organizations that we serve. They're the point of contact for that organization. We have a student project leader who is the point of contact for our organization. They oversee the project team, and these are teams of volunteer students who are engaged in various roles and responsibilities in the team. And they will interact with other types of stakeholders as well as needed, including sometimes the community organization also has vendors that they work with, so we would work with them. Now, this process can be scaled up, and that's what we've done. We started out with just 6 students going out with 6 companies, and we are now 80 students going out with 20 companies. And so in many ways, it has benefited a lot more students and a lot more organizations that way. These are the types of organization projects that we do, and you can see that digital technologies are a focus of all of those. And we have students who are organized on the teams to be specialists in these areas, but we also have people who want to learn these areas. And so we mix the teams in a way that makes sure that we have a way for people to learn as well. This shows how we can tap into the university and be able to get students from a variety of programs across the university. So a lot of these areas are degree programs and different types of focus areas that the faculty specialize in. And so we can establish students from each of these different areas to comprise a team. And if we need somebody to represent a particular type of focus, we'll go into the community or into the university and go to some students to participate on the teams. The group that you see here is a group of my project leaders from last year, and these are folks that oversee the teams. You will note that most of the people in this photograph are women. This is one of the prime organizational goals of iConsult, and that is the opportunity to advance women in technology management. So these are all managers, and they're all moving on into roles that are management roles, into their experiences as professionals in the field. So it does work to help advance people in the actual field, and also their team leader or their teams move on into professional roles, having had the experience then in working with these community organizations. So with that, I will turn it back to Tatiana, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Arthur, for presenting this case of combining engagement of non-profit and corporate communities into learning. Thank you. And now we are moving to University of New South Wales, and I would like to invite two representatives, two ladies, Miss Irene De Luna and Miss Lynn Gribble from the University of New South Wales. Please, first.
Thank you all so
Irene.
much for having me. Amazing. Nice to meet everyone. My name is Ari De Luna. I'm a change manager from the University of New South Wales. I am joined by Lynn Gribble, who is an associate professor from our School of Management and Governance. The Academic Success Monitor, or the ASM, is a tool embedded in Moodle that we're using at UNSW to help identify students who may be at risk of falling behind, noting that it's earlier in the term when it can still make a real difference. Powered by machine learning, the ASM analyzes student historical performance, course characteristics, and real-time digital engagement with course content and other activities to identify whether that student may be at risk. This is complemented by personalized AI-driven insights and support suggestions to really build on that user journey and connect students with the help that they may need. If a student is identified as at risk, the ASM does send a gentle nudge from the system to help connect those disengaged students with UNSW support resources. By really encouraging this self-management, the ASM also supports academics, reducing manual tracking, helping with retention, and really easing that administrative burden. The ASM integrates multiple student data sources into what we call our secure data lake, with the UX and UI driven by human-centered design frameworks. This really ensures that our staff and student users are at the heart of our design. During our trials, the ASM flagged 81% of our failures early. Academics also reported that it saved them over 2 hours a week, and engagement among at-risk students improved by 20% thanks to the timely AI messages. I will note that as we prepare to scale the ASM across all of UNSW this year, there's a change management effort to really enrich that data and technology literacy and shift mindsets to adopt this probabilistic experience to really better understand the machine learning and AI technologies that sit under the ASM. However, our goal is clear: to improve student success, support our educators, and ensure the right help is available just in time when it's needed the most. I'll probably ask Lynn if you had anything else you'd like to add.
I think the most important thing to note is that it's a minimum of 2 hours save, and what it allows us to do is to have a snapshot of a student, how they're engaging, and what it enabled us to do was to be data informed as to how we were supporting students. So it's not just a case of saying to a student, oh, this is what you might need, but we can actually link it to things like results, the sorts of experiences they were having during assessments. So ASM has enabled us to be data informed in an approach to, particularly I teach or have been teaching very large compulsory core courses. So this meant that we were able to very quickly identify the students who were missing or low in engagement or might have been struggling and put together a very holistic picture about their experience, and then make sure that we were able to give them very targeted support and continue following that up in a way that wasn't actually taking more academic admin time, but actually looking at it from an educational perspective. So we always keep the human in the loop on this particular process, and the course convener always, or course leader or the academic, always stays in charge of what's happening. So what we've got is this great sort of hand in glove approach from having ASM to support the teaching efforts of the academic. And I think that's a really important part here. We were able to get our failure rates right down to, in terms of the fact that the only people who failed my large course, which is over 1,300 students 3 times a year, were students who actually didn't do an assessment despite being nudged, or actually committed plagiarism. So we were really able to ensure that every student had their best opportunity to succeed in a compulsory core. So with that, I'll hand back. I'm conscious for overtime.
Thanks, Lynn. Thank you all so much for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Ariane. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you for your presentations. I have the last participating university, National University of Singapore, but unfortunately I have not seen Mr. Peter Van Yeobank among panelists. So I guess we can finish our university presentation sessions and move to Q&A session. Thank you very much for raising such important issues. We have just one question so far, and I believe its question is for Neil Butcher. How does WURI, World University Ranking for Innovations, innovate social changes? So kind of philosophical question. Neil, can you answer this question?
Well, in time-honored tradition, I'm going to hand the baton over to Alison, who had the engagement with the rankings system.
Yes.
So Alison, maybe you could give a quick response there.
Yeah, so I think the basic answer is I don't think WURI itself impacts social change. I think the point of ranking the universities is to raise awareness and to acknowledge what the universities are doing in that space. So I don't think the ranking system itself impacts social change, but it acknowledges institutions that are doing that and perhaps inspire, and through those case studies, inspires other institutions to do the same.
Thank you, Alison. So I believe yes, thank you for clearing my doubt. Yes. So we are moving to the end of our webinar. Thank you, dear participants, dear speakers, dear panelists, for your active involvement and for sharing your insights and experience. I believe we got a lot of food for thought. Please join me in thanking Neil Butcher and Alison Zimmerman for their valuable input. Yes, I just have a comment. Sorry. Yes, please, Liza Watson. We have here Liza Watson from Athabasca University, but unfortunately we are running out of time and we can't prolong our session anymore. So, dear participants, thank you very much, and we'll see all of you at the next UNESCO IIT webinars. Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.